Climate policy is now finally starting to hit home. In Britain, people with older cars are facing new costly charges just to drive them into big cities, supposedly to reduce emissions. And it was on this very issue where the Conservatives fought against the Labor Lord Mayor's policy to charge drivers that they managed to hang on against the odds to Boris Johnson's old seat of Uxbridge. But the British government still, despite this evidence of voters turning, they've still committed to banning all new fossil fuel-powered cars within 7 years and banning all new gas boilers for domestic heating. Although in recent days there has been a backflip from the PM Rishi Sunak to now move to encourage more offshore oil and gas exploration. As you're now probably aware, announced on Friday in Victoria, from January next year, the Andrews Labor government is banning all new gas domestic connections. And while the other Labor states are so far declining to do the same so far, the pressure's on, and the draft ALP national platform reportedly has been amended to include a new clause backing the retrofitting of homes to make them more energy efficient. Now, in an obvious case of green ideology and self-interest going hand in hand, the construction union, the CFMEU, wants more taxpayer funding on top of the $1.3 billion the Albanese government has already set aside to subsidise the house alterations needed if Labor's to meet its legislated 2030 emissions targets. Climate-driven home alterations paid for by you, the taxpayer. It reminds me a little of that crazy scheme in the Rudd-Gillard era to spend billions and billions of your money putting pink bats in homes to cut emissions. But we all know how that turned out, don't we? You can see where this is headed, can't you? More climate-driven controls, meaning higher costs for you as the consumer, while the Green left of the Labor Party used a whole lot of carrot and sticks to force you to change the way you live. And higher costs too, not just as consumers, but as taxpayers. And it'll all just get worse and worse and worse as long as the Green left are in power. To get its legislation through the Senate, of course, Labor needs Greens' support. So far, it's refused to bend to the Greens on its housing bill, where the Greens want ever more spending on so-called social housing. But now the Greens want taxes on gas to go up. Labor activists too, well, with the Greens, they'd like to see gas banned completely. Yet demonising gas is sheer stupidity, given we need gas in our energy mix because it is what makes renewables work. Because gas fills the void when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Without gas, quite literally, we're back in the dark ages. On the weekend, News Limited papers carried polling that tested, and I quote, how people would react when they were told that reaching net zero would mean eating less meat, getting rid of petrol and diesel cars and household gas appliances all by 2030 and jumping on fewer planes. Now, overall, the polling said the tipping point at which support for net zero turns negative is a jump of $10 to $20 in a monthly power bill. Now, in other words, once the annual cost of climate policies reaches about $240 a year. Well, we're well and truly there now, aren't we? Even Greens voters in this polling, well, they were only prepared to pay around $40 to $80 more a month in order to reach net zero. And that's why when climate policies turned into an economic issue, rather than just a moral one, it's where the coalition comes off best in elections. Pretty obviously, there's a real opportunity here if the coalition could grasp it to turn this Labor government into a one-term Albanese government.